Wow, weren't those photos extraordinary? So memorable of the Chloe that we knew. Welcome to this commemoration of the life and career of Chloe Munro AO, who for all of us was an always warm and caring friend, a brilliant colleague and inspiring leader. I'm Tim Orton, and I'm honoured to guide us through our ceremony today. And as you know, we were together today in the State Library of Victoria on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. And as a great reader and thinker, how Chloe would have loved that. Instead, we're gathering in a more dispersed manner on the traditional lands of many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and indeed with people who've joined us from outside Australia too. I myself am on the land of the Wattarong people, that's down outside of Geelong, and of Wattarong people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. There are a huge number of us joining today from many parts of the world, and in particular, I welcome Chloe's son, Fred Backler, and his partner, Charlie Chappell. I welcome Chloe's brother, Alistair, who's in the UK, and I'm told maybe on a ferry between Ireland and the UK. Welcome Charlie's parents, Deborah and Mark Chappell, and Chloe's partner for many years, David Backler. Thank you for joining us. Thank you in particular to Minister Lily D'Ambrosio, to the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, and particularly Secretary John Bradley, and to the hard-working project team and Delp Comms team for supporting and preparing us for this commemoration. And thank you in particular to Sophie Hines, Kathy Noble and Julietta Lush, who are really the workers behind the scenes who have helped put this together. In today's ceremony, I'll relate the early years of Chloe's life before handing on to a glittering array of Chloe's colleagues and friends, all of whom, of course, are great admirers, to relate what we may call Chloe's Australian years, the ones that we hold so dear. But let me go on to Chloe's early years. So Chloe was born in Edinburgh on the 29th of December 1955 and adopted to loving parents along with her elder brother, Alistair. 18 years later, Chloe ducks, not surprisingly, ducks to school in Edinburgh in 1973. But I have been told that in brother Alistair's judgment, Chloe's character and spirit was fully formed from around 13. She was always the trailblazer. Following her Edinburgh childhood, Chloe then moved south to read mathematics and philosophy with honours at Newnham College at Cambridge University, where she graduated in 1976, and she later completed an MBA at Westminster University in London. But let's go back to 76. Upon graduation, Chloe volunteered in Kenya for 2 years, 1977, 1978, teaching maths and science in the secondary schools in Kenya. She then worked for the next 13 years in a series of roles in London in printing, get the array, printing, community projects, and finally investment banking. And isn't that so Chloe? The diversity of those roles sort of signal, I think, Chloe's breadth of expertise, interest, and perhaps most importantly, flair. Early 90s in London, Chloe and David moved to New York, and Chloe to work in the New South Wales Treasury from 1991 to 1996. Very importantly, in 1993, Chloe gave birth to her son, Fred. And I can't tell you what drew Chloe to New Zealand, apart from giving birth to Fred, of course. But the economic and public sector historians on the call today will remember that 1991 to 96 in New Zealand was a radical and wildly interesting place for public sector economists. Some might say at times slightly mad as well. But for Chloe, being drawn to where the reform's happening and indeed making that reform happen better and more resilient is a theme that we'll hear being repeated through the coming hour as our speakers reflect on Chloe. Very fortunately for us here in Victoria, Chloe moved to our state in late 1996 to become Deputy Secretary Energy Projects at the Department of Treasury and Finance. I remember that time because that was, of course, during the privatisation of the SECV and the massive reform of Australia's electricity markets. Chloe was part of the birth of the NEM, the National Electricity Market, and as all of us know, played an essential leadership role through the next 25 years of reform in energy, water, the environment, natural resources, and of course, climate change. She was also loved and was highly active in the arts through this time too. It's these last 25 years of Chloe's life, from 1996 to 2021, that we'll primarily commemorate today. As we know, Chloe contributed so positively to Victoria and Australia, and importantly to so many of us personally too, that her contributions so ended so tragically early is heartbreaking for us all. Now, to tell the story of the Australian years, we'll first ask Minister Lily D'Ambrosio to speak. And following Lily, we'll have foresight scientist Graham Mitchell, who will recall working with Chloe at DNRE, or as it was often called, 1NRE. We'll then move to the current DELP Secretary, John Bradley, who will reflect on what's changed or not since Chloe's time as Secretary of DNRE. And then we'll have energy maven Sally Farrier tell us her story with Chloe of both firstly professional connection, which then grew into a deep personal relationship. Following Sally, we'll have three giants of the Victorian public sector and Australian energy markets more broadly, and the public good, of course. We'll reflect on Chloe in order: former DPC Secretary Helen Silver, DELP Deputy Secretary Anthea Harris, and now AEMC Chair, Australian Energy Markets, I've forgotten the C, my bad luck, Chair, Anna Collier. And finally, Kane Thornton, the CEO of the Clean Energy Council, will reflect on Chloe's legacy. So that's how the program will run today. We very much look forward to your engagement with it. And Minister D'Ambrosio, Lily, please take our story of Chloe's life forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim, and good afternoon to everyone. And I'm very blessed and honoured to say a few words in memory of Chloe. I'd like to also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are situated, and the land that I'm situated on is the land of the Wurundjeri people. And certainly I want to acknowledge all of their elders, past, present and emerging, and of course the lands of all of the peoples whose land that everyone is occupying right now, right across Australia. And I'd also like to, of course, acknowledge Chloe's family and friends who may be watching from around the country, but also from overseas. And my deepest condolences, of course, to families in particular. I'm here to join with all of you, of course, to celebrate an extraordinary woman, a colleague and a friend. And we know that there are going to be many terrific words said about Chloe as everyone remembers their own involvement and engagement through all of our lives' journeys. It was my pleasure and honour, certainly, to not only know Chloe, but also to work alongside of her for a number of years. She was very inspirational. She brought tremendous energy and passion to everything that she did. And Chloe foresaw a clean energy future long before it became a reality. And she recognised the challenges faced by Australia's energy system as emblematic of the transformation taking place right across the economy. She understood, of course, the need for multidisciplinary collaboration to help decision makers in particular forge a very strong path and a very determined path to a cleaner future. Tim mentioned certainly Chloe's arrival in Australia via the UK and New Zealand in 1996. And of course, she did join the Victorian government at the time. And certainly there was mention made of her role as Deputy Secretary in DTF. And certainly she headed the very significant and forever changing implementation of the energy reforms and privatisation program that occurred in the mid-1990s. Serving, of course, also as Secretary of the Department of Primary Industries and Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources. So she did leave, of course, government in 2004. Chloe, though, nevertheless, didn't stop serving, of course, the Victorian community. Her expertise in energy, climate, infrastructure and natural resource markets made her a sought-after member of numerous public bodies. These included Chair of the National Water Commission from 2004 to 2012, Chair of the Australian Energy Market Operator Expert Advisory Panel, and panel member of the Independent Review into the Future Security of the National Electricity Market. Chloe was also the inaugural Chair of the Clean Energy Regulator between 2012 and 2017. And as Chair of the CER, Chloe steered through some of the most turbulent policy periods for Australia's developing clean energy market. And this included the abolition of the carbon tax and review of the renewable energy target. So you can see that her place in history in terms of this significant reform pieces Victoria was the first state where that significant reform started. That led, of course, to the development and the establishment of the NEM, and of course that next period of turbulence in terms of policy settings through her work at the CER. She described her time at the helm of the CER as a rare opportunity to shape a new institution with a central role in delivering Australia's climate change commitments. Now, nearly 5 years later, it's clear that under her leadership, CER contributed much of the groundwork for today's fast-growing renewable sector. Despite her extraordinary achievements, Chloe was a warm and approachable person. It's not easy to find that combination when we're talking about the particular sector that Chloe very much devoted many years of service to. She was extremely generous with her time, and she loved to support younger colleagues, becoming a mentor to many. Working in government at a time of great change, she led decisively but cooperatively. Her compassionate leadership style made her many friends. She encouraged numerous young women to set their sights high without compromising their sense of who they were. And I'm delighted that some of these women will be speaking later at this event. Chloe's extraordinary talents won her many awards and acknowledgements. To mention just a few, she was awarded the Centenary Medal in 2001 for outstanding service to public administration, the Clean Energy Council's Outstanding Contribution Award in 2017, and an Order of Australia in 2018 for distinguished service to public administration through leadership roles in the areas of renewable energy, water and climate change process and reform, and to the performing arts. So seeing a large number of condolence messages across many sectors, I'm struck by the broad range of people that Chloe touched and inspired. It certainly testifies to what a powerful and unifying figure Chloe was. Her life was full of achievements, but perhaps her greatest legacy will be this, and that is that she brought people together from many, many different disciplines to carve a path towards a better, brighter future for Australia. Thank you for enabling me to say a few words in honour of Chloe's memory today.
Lily, thank you so very much for that. Let's take that then as the foundation for moving forward. We now have Graham Mitchell with us. Graham, you were part of what I think of as the Fab Four, the foresight team at DNRE in early 2000 when Chloe was secretary. Let's not focus on that, but very interested in your thoughts and experiences with Chloe as part of One NRE. Do tell us about One NRE, please. You're on mute, Graham, and you get a prize for that.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, Tim. And in this, I certainly will focus on One NRE, but just as a preface, I'd like to acknowledge the support that Chloe Munro provided to the science endeavour across the Department of Natural Resources and Environment. As Secretary of NRE, as Tim said, in the early 80s, she inherited from her predecessor, Mike Taylor, these characters, the Fabulous Four, or Awesome Foursome, we like to call it sometimes, Tim, the foresight principles, Nossel, Stocker, Pennington and Mitchell, as her outsourced chief scientists. We're all medical researchers, not agriculture or environment scientists. We developed a very productive relationship with Chloe, but it almost got off to a very bad start. In a very early meeting with Chloe, she was outlining her plans and philosophies. Gus Nossel leant forward and said something to the effect, Secretary, that is not how science works. And I can still see Chloe's face, the facial expression, saying, what the hell has Mike Taylor burdened me here with these characters, these four blokes? But that expression changed. That expression changed quite quickly when she, I think, recognised that she wasn't going to get the gratuitous or obsequious advice from these characters, rather the classical, frank and fearless. I think she was thinking, if I'm going to be a straight shooter, then my advisors in science, the essence of evidence-based policy, as you know, better be the same. But our memory, as Tim was alluding, our enduring memory of Chloe is her nurturing of and enthusiasm for the Whanganui in a supportive family environment, working through and trying to reconcile the often conflicting imperatives of agriculture and forestry, production, conservation, and preserving biodiversity, plant and animal. And she understood that good science should underpin that the entirety, and it was a very broad spectrum of science endeavour when you were at agriculture, environment, etc. A very broad spectrum of science endeavour and policy development. And that was the essence of NRE. And of course, it was a bit of a blow to that philosophy when NRE was split into DPI and DSE, and we were privileged to continue our functions as chief scientist in DPI and in DSE. We will remember many things about Chloe. I think that one NRE just resonates with so many, and certainly did with us. And we were highly supportive of the notion of having that debate in-house and trying to come up with a sort of consolidated view of how things should proceed going forward. We'll remember many things. But I think, as you will have seen, Tim and colleagues, in that those little montage, that sort of at the introduction, I think we'll remember her very warm and engaging smile. You know, that was really something which characterised Chloe, the personality, very warm, embracing, sort of, and memorable. It was a pleasure to have known her. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Graham. That was tremendous. And now we're going to come forward 20 years. In some ways, John Bradley, it might be argued that DELP is the modern manifestation of DNR. You're really just a chip off Chloe's very old block. But is that the way you see it? And when you think about DELP and DNRE, what are the things that have carried forward? What's the same? What might have changed, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim. And like others, it's a real privilege to be part of today. But Chloe and I actually used to laugh about the extent to which really I was just walking in the big footsteps that she'd left behind 20 years before, because to some extent, like a lot of other people we'll hear from today, we've been sort of moving in similar orbits. It always almost seemed kind of natural that I was going to end up at some point travelling into a space that Chloe had occupied and put such a stamp on in terms of natural resources and environment when she was the secretary. That theme of one NRE, it's amazing how it still resonates for people. We've got a lot of people in the department that are still there from the days where they worked with Chloe, and they called out that she brought the department together in that mode with a focus on a really clear vision she articulated. The brand was growth with a smaller footprint, and it had a focus on being informed by environmental science and supported by one NRE, which was the branding phrase that she used. And so we see a lot of resonance, not only in the kind of explicit organising framework we use in the department now. We've got a strong focus on one DELP. One of the biggest challenges we've got as an agency is how we bring together the breadth of our work in environment, land, water, planning, the climate change responsibilities. So many of these policy spaces that Chloe put her stamp on nationally. And how do you bring that together in an integrated way, Tim? And certainly we find that being able to synthesise those issues is very consistent with the kind of mode of operation that Chloe was promoting. And it helps the organisation to manage periods of change that Chloe was just so good at steering us all through in her work.
John, thank you very much. It is, as you say, really quite striking resonance between NRE and DELP. One of the magical parts of this presentation is I've neglected to tell all of you that we've got 3 videos that will intersperse our discussions as well. So we're now going to move to the first video where we have other colleagues and friends of Chloe's reflecting on the contribution she made to their lives. Thank you.
Chloe Munro was a really valued, highly respected and much liked fellow of our Learned Academy. Her commitment to energy reduction targets and the work that she did more broadly to educate people to understand those and hold the government to account was obviously very, very important. But Chloe's personal warmth and style, diplomacy and obvious joy, as well as her hard work ethic, they were really valued as much as anything, and she'll be greatly missed.
My very fondest memory of Chloe is a train trip we took together a few years ago from Melbourne to Albury for an event we were both speaking at. Over those 4 hours we covered a lot of territory, energy and climate policy of course, but also the mechanics of driving change, the role of governments, businesses and advocates in building a consensus for forward-thinking public policy, and the importance of leadership in getting all those elements to coalesce. It was an extended version of a conversation she had had with so many of us working the field she was passionate about. In those last few years, she was dedicated to passing on what she'd learned so that we were in the best possible position to run the next leg of the race. And that was Chloe in a nutshell. Always 2 steps ahead and generous to the last. We'll miss you.
On behalf of the staff at the Impact Investment Group and the Solar Fund boards, of which Chloe was the chairperson, I would like to acknowledge the amazing person that she was and the incredible leadership that she brought to our industry. We will miss Chloe greatly.
As a minister in the Bracks government, I saw firsthand Chloe's great contribution to the Victorian public sector and to natural resource management. I also greatly admired her national leadership in water and energy. But it was when Chloe came to Monash as a professorial fellow that I really appreciated what a wise and good person she was. Chloe gave her time and enormous expertise to researchers and educators working on climate action and on sustainability. Monash Sustainable Development Institute, the Monash Energy Institute, Monash Business School and Law School will all miss her greatly.
Like so many others, I knew Chloe as an outstanding professional from the first time that I met her in 1996. But it was her boundless humanity that defined her in my mind. The last time I saw Chloe was in a train, a chance meeting. She was returning from chemo treatment in Frankston, and she was happily chatting to a man who appeared to have the majority of his life's possessions in a trolley. She gave him some money as we got off the train at Flinders Street, later explaining to me that clearly he needed the money more than I do. Throughout, she explained with a smile on her face that it was now 2 steps backwards and 1 step forward with her treatment. But of course, was more interested to know, how are you, Neil? What are you up to these days? And even though we both have to wear masks, I could see the smile in her eye. And it will always be her smile and her care for others that I think best defines Chloe Munro in my mind.
I was very fortunate to have worked very closely with Chloe over many years at the Clean Energy Regulator. Chloe coached and mentored me through some incredible challenges, including the implementation of the carbon pricing mechanism and the revised large-scale renewable energy target. Chloe was always bold, optimistic, full of ideas. One time when everyone said the large-scale target couldn't be met, and Chloe and I were worried, Chloe reminded me we're an economic regulator and we must remain optimistic. She was always right. Chloe did tell me she had a bet with a former minister and politician who had publicly said the target couldn't be met. And I did tell Fred recently that I understand he can collect on that bet and go and collect the keys to this person's house. So Chloe always backed herself and her people fully.
Thank you so much to Carly, Luke, Lane, John, Neil and Mark for those fabulous memories of Chloe. And we're now going to move to Sally Farrier. I think that video is a hard act to follow, Sally, but let's work through it. You met Chloe professionally in 1996, soon after arrival in Australia. Do tell us about those early Australian years, please.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And yes, what a hard act to follow. I think I met Chloe just when she arrived, and I'd say that for a start, her arrival was eagerly anticipated. her reputation preceded her. She came, I reckon, straight to Spring Street from the airport, and no surprises to all. She was perfectly attired. She had bright red lipstick. She had a gorgeous accent, and she was immediately commanding. So, this was a Mary Poppins moment, perfect in every way. Chloe then, 25 years ago, was young. She was a master of working out when to intervene, how to bring disparate teams together. She led without controlling. Her enthusiasm and her energy were contagious. She had courage, and she led a group of ambitious professionals through what the minister referred to a complex reform and through the Longford gas explosion crisis. Within that unit, she held us to account. She always delivered on her own promises as well. And I think she encouraged innovation. Risk-taking was part of making progress. She never sweated the small stuff, and she knew where she wanted to direct her focus. At the same time, her artistic flair shone through. She shared, we shared an edgy love of fashion. She was also, though, fiercely protective of her family and her schedule. And she was delighted when Fred and David, dropped by the office. By the end, Fred was a little toddler. So this is 1996. Yeah, so that's those really early years.
I reckon, Sally, that image of Mary Poppins arriving from Wellington will be one of the moments of this commemoration. But over time, as you explained to me, your relationship sort of expanded from just a professional relationship to quite a personal friendship as well. Tell us more about Chloe through that lens.
Yeah, thanks. And it's funny, isn't it? I figured that you get forged friendships through time together and through shared passions. And obviously we had a shared interest in lots of energy and water stuff. But really, our truest friendship was forged through running. And Chloe, for some reason, Fred still doesn't know, took up running in 2010. And I invited her to experience jogging with some Kiwi soulmates of mine. So the rest of that is history. For 10 years plus, the running crew, as Chloe called them, herself, me, my husband, Vicky, Barb and Richard, we met every Sunday morning in Elwood, and we sort of laughed and talked our way through kilometres and kilometres. The running was pretty incidental. So Chloe obviously went on to run both half and full marathons. So not surprisingly, we discussed topography, going back to her first starts, graphics, travel plans, movies, books, gardening. She astonished us with tales about the joys of bottling kumquats from the garden and how to make tofu by hand, which is sort of course, Chloe. But she also opined on energy, water, education and health policies. And I guess, no matter what, even as a friend, Chloe was always deeply considered and articulate. She was also, though, a really true friend in the sense that she was always 100% engaged and present. So she never did a grocery list while you're talking to her. She was always there. She also freely offered her counsel, and she was charmingly honest and to the point. But she never judged, never expressed regret or envy. I think as a friend, she was also incredibly thoughtful. So she baked Scottish black buns, which were her mum's recipe for New Year's Eve. And her casual entertaining always involved multiple courses of perfectly sequenced tastes and textures. I think, poignantly, she shared her cancer diagnosis with us about a kilometre into one of those runs in 2012. She'd had about 24 hours to process the diagnosis, and she characterised it as just something to live with and something to manage. And that was just, so Chloe, I guess. So, yeah.
Sally, and then just to share a secret with everyone, Sally and Chloe and I shared a personal trainer over the last year. The intention of which was to exhaust the personal trainer before I got to the next to us. But you were very close to Chloe in the last few months of her life. Can you talk to us about that too, please?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have to say, Chloe, we shared a personal trainer for different reasons. And Chloe loved it. She also was determined to maintain her physical agility. And I understand that her test was that she could get her toaster down from the top of the shelf. And so she trained to be able to keep her balance and to be able to do that. So they had the toaster test. She moved to that apartment in end of 2020, and we all celebrated with champagne, knowing that at that time her health indicators weren't flash. But she was incredibly, not surprisingly, optimistic that medical science would win and that the odds, would be in her favour. But she also, particularly in hindsight, had a plan sorted. She created her own, recipe, I guess, for joy, peace, and lasting impact. And for Chloe, that meant, I think, dialing up on all her weapons and secret weapons and really prioritising. And I think, you look around, people speaking today, Chloe relished and really enjoyed her professional roles. So she purposely managed her schedule in those last few months to ensure she had the strength and the energy to fulfil them. And to her, stepping down was not an option, and it wouldn't have brought her any joy. She continued, despite COVID, to dress with flair and keep her spirit and strength. She rejuvenated herself through arts and through plants. And she seeded lots of new connections between people so that her work would continue. I think at the same time, she was deeply caring. And so she was fiercely proud and protective of Fred and his partner, Charlie. And we often talk, places and music, and those always provoke memories. And she talked about trips as a family, and she talked about surprise concerts with David. I guess, in those later periods, COVID courses into lockdown, and Tim, it's, close to you, when the Rising was about to kick off and Lucy Guerin's pendulum performance installation was affected by that. I talked to Chloe. She called from a hospital bed, and her immediate reaction was how disappointed she was for Lucy and for that performance. So, we spoke a lot during those final weeks, and, Chloe was a great believer that everything is possible and even the impossible is possible. But she also mentioned, and probably a direct dig at me and everyone, I think, that the thought does not equal the deed. So I think she was delivering to us, a call to action. So, she stayed entirely true to herself, and it's been a complete privilege to have known her for that time and to be part of her legacy.
Thanks so much, Sally. That really was tremendous. And you mentioned towards the end Chloe's involvement with Lucy Guerin. We now have a video of Lucy reflecting on Chloe's support of the Lucy Guerin Dance Company. And you do see a little bit of the show that never got to perform at the Rising Festival. Thank you. Let's look through the video. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucy Guerin, Artistic Director of Lucy Guerin Inc., contemporary dance company based in Melbourne. Chloe Munro was on the board of our organisation for 10 years and was chair for 7. In this clip, you'll see some small dance snippets from works that Chloe supported and loved. When she joined us, she was shuttling between Melbourne and Canberra on a weekly basis with a demanding schedule, yet she always had time for us and led us with a down-to-earth and positive wisdom. Chloe believed in art as a meaningful and motivating aspect of society, and she drew strength and inspiration from her engagement with artists and from seeing performances. As a choreographer and director of our company, this gave me confidence and courage. She has been a very tangible affirmation of how art can give meaning to people's lives and to have that so near has sustained us through doubts and tough times. She has left a vivid imprint on our organisation. Notable was her running in the Melbourne Marathon in 2015 and raising money for Lucy Guerin Inc., guiding us through a Senate inquiry where arts funding was called into question, joining us on our last tour in Barcelona to see Split, one of her favourite works, for I think the 5th time, and fabulous fashion at our opening nights. I guess I just wanted to say thank you, Chloe. We miss you so much, and we're so much richer for your time with us.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That was tremendous. We're now going to go back a little bit in time to work through the 90s, 2000s and the 2010s with 3 colleagues of Chloe's who will bring different perspectives to them. Firstly, Helen Silver, then Anthea, and then Anna. So Helen, you knew Chloe from pretty much the time she arrived from New Zealand, as Sally had. Talk to us about your perspectives of Chloe, please.
Yes, and thank you. And thank you for everybody who's given such a wonderful insight into Chloe. When I first met Chloe in the mid-1990s, it was rare in the public sector to meet women who were economists and in policy-making roles. And even now, few women reach their full career potential. Chloe did this. She became a secretary of a major department. She filled C-suite roles in Telstra and was chair and commissioner of many important bodies. I met Chloe just after she arrived from New Zealand to work in Treasury and Finance on the privatisation of the energy authorities. In keeping with her vibrant personality, appropriately, we met at a drinks function for a new economic consultancy. We immediately clicked. I felt I had met a kindred spirit, both in personality and in reformist zeal. Later, in the 1990s, we got to work directly together on a tripartite task force set up by the new Bracks government with the objective of bringing common law back into the workers' compensation scheme on a sustainable basis. Our assignment was to bring employers and trade unions into agreement with the government. This was no easy task, with some very strong advocates to manage, including Bill Shorten. Chloe knew how to be tough, but a fair-minded negotiator. She combined raw intelligence, technical mastery, and insight with a tenacity and the charm that made her a wonderful leader, colleague, and friend. Chloe and I connected over many years as our careers progressed. When I was Secretary of the Premier and Cabinet, I had a few people who I considered were wise counsel. Chloe was one of those people. Chloe's quiet confidence and warmth made her easy to confide in. She was an important role model for young female leaders with her authentic and intelligent leadership style. To have lost a friend and colleague over many years is especially tragic because she had so much more to give. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Helen. Anthea, when I was talking with you, you talked about the 3 epochs of Chloe for you. Do share the 3 epochs, please.
Certainly. So Chloe's been a big influence in my life and over 3 important periods. So I first met Chloe right back in 1997. I was just a little youngster running around in DPC looking after utilities. And Chloe was this wonderful figure looking after the DepSec, looking after energy in Treasury at the time. And it was a tremendously exciting time in energy, of course. There was huge reforms being undertaken, whole new regulatory regimes being created, whole new institutions. And it was, of course, the time of the birth of the NEM. And I remember the birth of the NEM occurred and then it dawned on people that they hadn't actually built in a spot for officials to be able to get together to talk about where next for the NEM. And so a very early group, the forerunner to a senior officials meeting, was formed, and I was the secretariat for that group. And so I have these distinct recollections of Chloe sailing in this enormous faux leopard skin coat, and it was of course the 90s, and it was energy, so it was of course wall-to-wall men, apart from Chloe. But Chloe was always the person who led discussions, and it was always the person that everybody listened to. And despite the fact that I'm the secretary, I'm there taking the minutes, Chloe was always tremendously kind and encouraging and warm, even then, and so completely non-hierarchical. So fast forward over a lot of years and until we get to 2012, when the next sort of epoch of Chloe began, and Chloe was the chair of the newly created Clean Energy Regulator, and I was appointed as the CEO of the Climate Change Authority. And so these were both new bodies, and we were both tremendously excited. And of course, Chloe had been leading lots of organisations, so it was kind of old hat to her. And this was, of course, my very first, my Fisher-Price very first small agency. And so it was wonderful for me to have Chloe to be able to call on for support and encouragement. And for all the wrong reasons, I saw actually quite a lot of Chloe. That was 2012 was, of course, the year she was diagnosed, and she actually spent a lot of time working out of our offices in Melbourne, and that fitted in with a lot of her treatment at the time. Well, it was great for me to be able to see a lot of her, but, I really do wish it was for better circumstances. And that period, of course, the years after, led to some pretty turbulent times in climate change policy in particular, and it was wonderful to have Chloe to talk to lean on, to do some mutual venting with, and to help us get through those times. And then fast forward to some more years, and so to the current epoch. So now I'm the current female economist in the Deputy Secretary Chair of looking after energy. And another huge period of change in the energy markets, where all sorts of things are being rethought, redone, thinking about all of our regulatory frameworks and institutional setups. And so I was delighted and privileged to that Chloe Munro, so despite her health and despite her really needing to prioritise the sorts of things that she could spend her time and her energies upon. One of those things was to be the chair of our Energy Transition Advisory Panel to help advise on these really big issues. And as she told me, she said, well, I'm just trying to concentrate on the very important things. This is a very important thing, and I'm so grateful that she did that. And so all of this time, and still before me now, I just had this wonderful example of how you can be and to be bold and to really keep your eye on the big picture and think about what's important, to really say what you think, to don't miss those opportunities, to listen to others, to be empathetic and to be collaborative, and to maintain warmth and a sense of humour. And of course, for Chloe, there was always that tremendous degree of style that went with everything. And I'll never be able to pull that latter part off particularly, but it was such a wonderful example to have had before me. And her encouragement and support and friendship and advice along all of those three different epochs is just so very, very special to me.
Thank you so much, Anthea. Annie, you've talked to me about how Chloe was an important mentor to you. How she shaped your career, and probably more importantly, in doing so, how did she make you feel?
Thanks so much, Tim. It's a real privilege to be able to speak tonight, and particularly because, as we've heard, Chloe mentored so many people during her career, and there's so many people who've had the benefit of that wonderful mentoring. There's two things that really stood out for me, and they're really consistent with all the themes that we've already heard this evening. So the first one was really that ability she had to make such a human connection. And I remember very clearly the first time that I met her and how intimidated I was in meeting Chloe. And in fact, Sally had introduced us because I was at one of those turning points in my career, and Sally said, oh, Chloe would be a great person for you to talk to. And in that first meeting, what I remember of it actually is Chloe talking about whether or not she was happy with the way her hair was growing back after the chemotherapy. And in subsequent conversations, we'd talk about things like how she actually managed to get her nail polish to exactly match the shade of her eyeglasses. And these earrings, in fact, that I'm wearing tonight in her honour, she felt it was a real lost opportunity to have the words dream and teen instead of the word dream appearing on both ears. And so apart from that ability to make you feel really comfortable and so to get the best out of you, and of course the fact that I'm sure so many of her mentoring relationships turned into great friendships, what I really saw in this was those leadership qualities of just being yourself and being really comfortable in your own skin. And that's what I learned very much by osmosis from Chloe, because that's exactly who she was. The second thing was how Chloe would talk to you about the things that, the serious issues. So the things where she had such enormous expertise and experience and intellect. So for me, that was in the energy sector. And she'd always come to those conversations with the respect and curiosity that we've heard about that would really then, again, bring out the best in you. So really challenge you to be in on your best game. And I was always, the favourite thing that I would hear her say when I put forward one of my ideas would be if she would go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective before. And I'd really thought that I'd landed something. And so we had a wonderful conversation like this earlier this year when I just actually started in this role, maybe 6 weeks in, and I had a bad day. And she spent about an hour with me on the phone, kind of trying to unravel a couple of the tricky issues that I was grappling with. And at the end of the call, I didn't have the answers. Like, she was never someone who would tell you the answers. But what I did have was just a much lighter feeling and a sense that I would be able to find out the answers, that I'd be able to have the resources at my disposal to actually work it out. And it was that kind of ability to empower other people, I think, that really contributes to that lasting legacy of so many leaders within the energy sector, and is something that I personally will miss enormously.
Thanks so much, Anna. And to one more energy leader, Kane, can you provide your reflections on Chloe, in particular your sense of her legacy, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim. What beautiful reflections we've already had tonight, and it's a real privilege to be able to share some of mine. I met Chloe about a decade ago, and it was obvious to me instantly that she was someone incredibly special. And over many a coffee and lunch since, I guess I managed to sponge some of Chloe's incredible wisdom that she was so generous in passing on. And there were three kind of really powerful ideas, I guess, that she left me with that I think have shaped my life and will continue to for many years to come. We've heard some of these already tonight, but they were firstly to be biased towards positivity. Chloe always said to me that positivity was a mindset and it comes with practice. And there's no doubt that Chloe was a master practitioner of positivity, clearly right to the end. And I think in these really challenging times, that's a trait and an idea that I think is really important for everyone. The second one was to take action. Don't wait. Be deliberate. Be prepared to say no. Be very conscious and focused and authentic to yourself, but take action, get on with it, and don't have regrets. Very clearly, Chloe was impatient for change. She was a disruptor. And she was very determined, but surprisingly stubborn on occasion. And so that was the second powerful idea, I think, that she left for me. And the third one is a theme that we've heard already tonight, but it's around the importance of investing in future leaders. Chloe always made time to listen, to be present, to be curious, to engage with people on their own journey. And she was a very regular presenter to our many clean energy events and particularly our Women in Renewables campaign. She shared her wisdom, she shared her insights, and she supported those emerging future leaders. And what she leaves behind is clearly a network of insightful, confident, skilled, fierce leaders, and that's an extraordinary legacy. So they're just I guess, three of the ideas that really resonated strongly with me, and I think act as something of a call to action, both for me and for many others. And I think we're going to hear shortly from some of the other people that she had a profound impact on.
So let's go to that video now, Kane, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you.
Chloe wasn't an extraordinary person, and I wish to highlight a characteristic I particularly remember: her compassion for people. My name is Tabalia Nylon, and I had the utmost privilege to be Chloe's executive officer near the end of her term at the Clean Energy Regulator. I held Chloe on a pedestal and was anxious going into this role, but Chloe built my confidence. I remember her pulling me aside saying, "Don't apologise, state your mind and be bold." And that was Chloe, caring yet forthright. I witnessed Chloe's ability to move people from all walks of life. Her smile and humour was contagious, and her ability to bring people along the journey was simply remarkable. Chloe was leaving a legacy of climate change actions and prioritised connecting with others before moving on. She truly valued people within and beyond the regulator in driving this work. Chloe continued to dedicate her precious time mentoring me beyond the regulator. She genuinely cared for others. Chloe, I celebrate your life, and thank you very much for inspiring me and many others to strive for purposeful lives. Take care all.
Once we've grown up, there are only a handful of people that really influence our style of thinking, and Chloe Munro was undoubtedly one of those people. When Chloe provided strategic guidance on the development of a briefing for supporting businesses with navigating Australia's energy transition, she challenged and tested not just the thinking of newbies like me, but the thinking of peers with decades of experience in the field, inspiring us all to be creative and agile, finding solutions that don't just work, but that can be scaled for impact across the whole economy. Chloe pushed us to strive, and we're all the better for it, just as Australia's energy transition is.
I'm very pleased to contribute to a tribute of Chloe, as I knew her through her many roles, including when she was Clean Energy Regulator Chair, and in her time in Victorian Government, and in her recent roles at Monash University as Professorial Fellow. Monash University is one of the co-founders of ClimateWorks Australia, which I lead. Chloe was always warm and interesting and insightful. She cared deeply about good public policy and good institutions. She gave her time to sustainability issues often, and organisations generously. We spent hours discussing energy market reform together, and I'm lucky enough to have had time with Chloe to form a friendship. And with friendship with Chloe came mentorship, thanks to her superbly deep and broad experience and her interest in nurturing other leaders and other ideas. She lived in my neighbourhood for a while, and we used to continue our energy policy discussions home on the journey in the tram or the cab ride after energy sector events. And Chloe was amazing to find time for others. Even with her many roles, she would take the time to connect and support others. I was privileged to be included in a group of women in energy where she used to arrange these dinners for about a dozen women every now and then who all worked in energy and sustainability. And we didn't all know each other, but Chloe knew each of us, and she knew that we would benefit from knowing each other. And she put the effort in to pick a restaurant and gather us together. She was in fact arranging one of these dinners in the weeks just before she died. The world really is richer for Chloe's contributions and the poorer for her loss. I know I'm one of many who will miss her deeply, and am very pleased to have had the privilege of knowing her.
Hey, Kane, so they're wonderful examples of the bold women you were talking about. Please take us forward then as to how we'll remember Chloe. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Tim, and what beautiful reflections and touching words tonight. But I think in Chloe's spirit, she would have wanted to have also seen some action. And it gives me, it's a great honour to be able to tonight announce the Chloe Munro Scholarship for Transformational Leadership. And it's a scholarship there to really catalyse a continued wave of emerging female leaders in Australia, really in continuing Chloe's legacy. The program will initially offer some 14 scholarships for emerging female leaders in the fields of clean energy, in energy management and carbon abatement. Further scholarships will be offered over the coming 5 years. The scholarships will be provided for one of 2 courses offered by Women in Leadership Australia: the Executive Ready course, a 7-month development program for mid-career leaders, and also the Leading Edge program, a 4-month development program for early career leaders. The scholarship has been established as a result of the leadership and support of some fantastic organisations, and I'd like to acknowledge in particular the Victorian Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, but also a range of other organisations: the Energy Efficiency Council, the Australian Energy Market Operator, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the Carbon Market Institute, Goldwind Australia, Hydro Tasmania, Impact Investment Group, Monash University, UPC Renewables, and the staff at the Energy Security Board, and also Anna Collier for their contribution. I think that just demonstrates the breadth and depth of Chloe's impact right across the broader environment and energy portfolios. Together, these organisations have contributed almost $100,000 to go towards the scholarship, which is a fantastic start. And if there's other organisations who would like to also contribute, please do consider that and get in touch. Applications will open from tomorrow, and you can visit the Clean Energy Council website for more information on the scholarship and application details. These women will obviously be encouraged and supported to establish a strong network, to continue to support each other, to build their confidence and capability, and really to continue to drive the change of the Australian energy system and our response to climate change. And I think, like Chloe, my expectation is that they will be impatient for change. Very clearly, we will miss Chloe, but this scholarship will continue her incredible legacy.
Thanks so much, Kane. And as you say, Chloe was so action-oriented. The scholarship is a great way to wrap up this commemoration. If we were in the State Library, of course, we'd now pour out and be together, there would be about 400 of us. So it would be, which is just a testament to the breadth of relationships that Chloe had across Victoria and across the world. The number of supporting organisations of the scholarship is also a testament of Chloe's breadth. A woman of enormous humanity, warmth, brilliant intellect, but as perhaps charmingly as anything else, extraordinary colour and flair. We remember Chloe Munro AO. Thank you very much. Bye.